video, we're going to be reviewing the Rock Island Armory Imports VRBP100. Nice bullpup shotgun. So you have a couple on the market that are available, but this one was the only one I had immediate access to, and it seemed like it had all the features that I wanted for the most part. Of course, you're always compromised no matter what gun you're getting, right? So with all that said, first thing I want to talk about is after 1,000 rounds, how's this gun doing? Well, there's a few subjects to talk about, so please bear with me. This might be a little bit of a long one, so get your snacks and drinks, right? Okay, so first thing is you got Tavor like a ergos, and this almost looks like the Halo battle rifle. So with that said, you got the charging handle up here. This is the only real control that reminds me of the Tavor, and we're talking about the old Tavor, not the X95. So you got the front charging handle here. Note on this is that number one, it is metal and it is skeletonized. So problem here, if you are not holding this with a nice tight grip up front, even if you are, you will get a little bit of kick back in your thumb if you're touching it. So it's best to be back a little bit, or maybe just rest your thumb on top of it. That's fine. It's non-reciprocating. It's good. So also, if your fingernail's even in the path of it, like this far away, you could actually shuck off your fingernail like I did. And I was just holding it like this and just trying to do a standing shot, and boom, and it went into one of the holes here and scraped off my fingernail nice and clean. So with all that said, that's the only real control that reminds me of the Tavor, but the overall profile is very similar. Obviously, you just don't have that trigger guard right here. So next thing is the controls, I guess you could say. So this is kind of got a mix. The AR-15 style control that everybody's reminded by. Some people say that is the selector lever. No, I'll explain why in a second. But the AR-15 control that it reminds a lot of people of it is obviously the paddle here. So it drew inspiration from that. So no big deal. To me, it actually feels more like my AUG, except my AUG has a little bit of a bigger paddle. So it's a little bit easier than this. I have to hunt for this little paddle. However, it's in a good spot because it's right above the mag release, which is a very intuitive area. And the mag release reminds me of my PTR 91 because I have the tack latch on there, which I push in sideways instead of forward, which would be right behind the magazine. But I push sideways to release my magazines on my PTR and this one. It does have an ambidextrous control, but this really is not set up for being ambidextrous. The sling swivel QD, the QD areas for the slings, right here and right here, just like the Tavor actually, right behind the charging handle, which is terrible for being able to fully charge it because the sling swivel actually got in the way a lot for the Tavor, and it doesn't really get in the way here because it's raised a little bit and it's just behind it. So a little bit different, but it really sucks for an area. I'm using a Vickers sling, but my layout probably just is not very good for this. So probably something a little more low profile, getting away from the QD before actually having the sling material would probably be a good idea if you actually care to sling this thing. But I would love to see them actually have QDs on the other side. So, and with that said, the controls on this, very intuitive, very easy. So basically, you charge your shotgun, get some ammo in there. Then when you're doing a reload, you grab it, pull it out, let it fall or whatever, and then grab your next one, and then right above where the magazine release is, you just turn up, hit the paddle. You don't even need to look at it. Shouldn't have to look at it. But the controls, very intuitive. I like them. My recommendation is if you find them to be stiff, go ahead and get some snap caps for the shotgun. Load up your magazines with your reloading magazine, so your other mag with one shell, your snap cap shell, and then go ahead and lock it back. Work on ejecting that magazine, dropping it, pocketing it, dump pouching it, whatever, and go ahead and loading up the fresh one and releasing it. It'll work on the metal and metal friction points between the bolt face and the little piece that's retaining the bolt to the rear. So that's what actually needs the attention. So lubricate it a little bit before going to the range. It should help. But in the meantime, get it nice and dry and just run it. And run that friction point, and it'll polish it down quite nicely. So, with all that said, next thing I want to talk about is the trigger. It's the big sticking point for a lot of people. The trigger on here can pull from anywhere from 8 to 12 pounds, so we can actually top out my Lyman gauge. But let me go ahead and do a trigger pull on this shotgun just to kind of show you what I'm getting right now. Okay, so we'll touch, and getting 9 pounds. Now if you don't touch it first before pulling, it says over. Same area and everything. But as you would do if you were shooting, you touch first, and 8 pounds. So the biggest issue I had with this was between 400 and 600 rounds. I had problems with every type of practice ammo, like range ammo that you could think of. Well, not all that you could think of, but most of the range ammo that we find today are not going to be exceeding more than like 1200 feet per second. This is not a shotgun for mouse fart loads. This is a shotgun that was made in Turkey. And if you know anything about Turkish manufacturing, they base their designs off of the ammunition that they have. And typically the ammunition they have is like what Europe gets. Europe ammunition is hotter than American ammunition. We water our crap down because we're safety sallies, and we're so scared of something that's a little bit more than Sammy spec. So basically, in order to get this thing to function right off the bat, defensive loads. Anything that is going under 1300 feet per second is going to give you problems. My recommendation is for the first 500 rounds, do not go under 1400 feet per second in any of your loads. Do turkey loads. Do Rio buckshot. That's what I was doing. Rio buckshot, slugs, whatever. With my cylinder choke, which I still have yet to change out. I'm not going to work with any other chokes. But basically, you're taking a shotgun design, a gas design, that was meant for actually hunting, and they turned it into a sporter gun. That is not an evil thing to do. That's fine. However, it's on the end user to understand this. Unfortunately, the manual doesn't say very much about this except for a little bit of a warning in the beginning saying that you need to be using something that's over 1300 feet per second. So they were using Fiocchi, I believe, and that's good to know. But you need to know that right off the bat. So for all you yahoos who are looking at this, this is for serious loads. And I'm going to tell you right now, recoil is not that bad on this thing. The recoil is actually less than my 870 for a couple of reasons. Number one, I believe the wider base pad is one of the bigger reasons. Number two, it's a gas system, and realistically, if you have your thing broken in and everything's doing fine, it's going to use up most of that gas pressure, and you should have a pretty good strength in your recoil spring. So it's going to hit. The bolt is tiny, and it doesn't really have much density. Neither does the little piece that it's riding on, the little stainless piece. I don't remember what goofy name they gave it, but they had all these different names in each manual, the old manual and the new manual. For the older model and the newer model, they called it something different. So it hits way back here. So if you take the cap off through the back plate, you take this off and you unscrew it or whatever, you can, like, I guess, get into the internals after popping out a bunch of pins and unscrewing a bunch of stuff that I'm not even going to touch. But it hits a little backer there. There's a rubber pad or a polymer pad on the back of the bolt, so it buffers the shock. I noticed that the recoil is less on this, which is really nice, and it goes right back on target. You don't really have to fight it. It's really comfortable. I've never had a bruised shoulder with this thing, so that's really nice. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about before I talk about my other subject is this thing, the cheek riser. This cheek riser is going to be a pain, so my recommendation is to take off this butt cap. I don't have any of the extenders because there's no reason for them. I'm already a shorter stature and I want this low profile as possible. So anyways, take this off, unscrew this thing all the way, and the little nut that's on the back end of this, put some Loctite on it, glue, super glue, whatever, and put this cheek riser where you want it. For me, it's all the way down. So Under recoil, screws, pins, whatever, things are going to move from the vibration. It's going to happen. It's happened on every system I've had that's had screws, you know, whatever, grips on pistols, you know, whatever. They walk out if you don't have like Loctite on them or some kind of system that prevents movement. So with all that said, that's the last thing I want to talk about before I talk about disassembly. So here's the thing. When you have this shotgun, it's recommended that you clean it. When I talked to Rock Island Armory, they said clean it every like 300 to 500 rounds. And I didn't clean it for about 500 rounds. Thing worked beautifully. In fact, the more I shot it without cleaning it and with the less lubricant, the better it worked. The gas system, whatever issue I was having with the gas system, it worked better. So I just did not clean the piston at all. And then I cleaned it and tried shooting it again. I was good on issues. I just cleaned the piston itself, not the internal area that the piston kind of locks into with its little metal O-ring. But when it comes to disassembly, you need to make sure that you keep this tool on you. I am not kidding here, because when you need to tighten this thing down, you need to tighten it down like the Hulk. Because under firing, if you fire this 100 times, this thing's going to loosen up. That's just the way it is. This tool is going to be very necessary for you to get in there and grab it and torque it down. And yeah, I really recommend that you get this thing nice and tight, and if you want it loosened up, shoot it a bit. So that's my recommendation for that. I can't remember a time that I went to the range, even after torquing this thing down, and shot like 100, 200 rounds, and I didn't look at it and be like, oh great, my choke is loose and it's trying to walk out, and this thing is loose and trying to walk out. So yeah, I've actually had this thing to where it needed a full rotation to tighten it again before I was actually able to use this tool. That's one thing that you might want to be a little concerned about. So as far as cleaning is concerned, I have a video on disassembly of this shotgun, and I show you where to lubricate. Well, it's pretty much the same, though you don't need to use all that much lubrication. I actually found that most of the places here that you need to lubricate are going to do fine on their own. I would just say the bolt, for the most part, needs lubrication. Maybe a little bit of lubricant on the piston itself would be okay. But for the most part, it's all good. The biggest thing for lubrication for this system would be ease of cleaning, so you can wipe the stuff away. Like on the actual guide rod itself, like down here, the little stainless steel piece that the piston and the, I guess, operational rod or whatever that holds the bolt and everything, and the recoil spring, I would lubricate that just at the point where all the gases are going to flood it, because that stuff will stick. And if you don't want to have to sit there and clean for a long time, then I would lubricate that a little bit. Typically that's the thing of lubrication for firearms, is it'll prevent you from needing to go as detailed into cleaning and use aggressive chemicals, so to speak. So with all that said, that's pretty much it that I have to pass on to you guys as far as information on how this thing performs at 1,000 rounds. I've worked with this thing pretty well, I think. This is a shotgun that I would say is good for serious usage. The only thing is, because of the questionable reliability, I've noticed with some of the loads, like the target loads and even RIA loads. RIA loads are more the budget type, practice shooting with buckshot type, but if you have a load like triple-aught buck, like a federal load or something like that, I would really recommend investing in about 50 to 100 shells and machine gunning it through this thing. Get it dirty first, and then run those shells through it and check it out, because that's what you need to do to make sure that the things are reliable in a semi-automatic. I'm sorry to say, but a semi-automatic mag-fed shotgun is probably the worst kind of shotgun to have as far as like reliability is concerned, because they're generally not the most reliable, because you're relying on the magazine to actually keep up with it instead of like a pump action or a tubular fed magazine, I guess you could say. But you know, with all that said, that's pretty much all I got for you guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Go ahead and leave a comment below if you have any experience with this shotgun in particular. And let me know what you think. And thanks a lot. I'll see you guys in another video.